Part 4 of Everyday Use. "Why don't you just take one or two of the others?" I asked. "These old things was just done by me and Big D from some tops your grandmother pieced before she died." "No," said Wingraro, "I don't want those. They are stitched around the borders by machine." "They'll make them last better," I said. "That's not the point," said Wingraro. "These are all pieces of dresses Grandma used to wear. She did all this stitching by hand. Imagine she held these quilts securely in her arms," stroking them. "Some of the pieces, like those lavender ones, come from old clothes her mother handed down to her," I said, moving up to touch the quilt. Dee Wangaro moved back just enough so that I couldn't reach the quilt. They already belonged to her. "Imagine," she breathed again, clutching them closely to her bosom. "The truth is," I said, "I promised to give them quilts to Maggie for when she marries John Thomas." She gasped like a bee had stung her. "Maggie can't appreciate these quilts," she said. "She'd probably be backward enough to put them to everyday use." "I reckon she would," I said. "God knows I've been saving them long enough with nobody using them. I hope she will." I didn't want to bring up how I had offered Dee Wangaro a quilt when she went away to college. Then she had told me they were old-fashioned and out of style. "But they're priceless," she was saying now, furiously, for she had a temper. "Maggie would put them on the bed, and in 5 years they'd be in rags. Less than that." "She can always make some more," I said. "Maggie knows how to quilt." Dee Wangaro looked at me with hatred. "You just will not understand. The point is these quilts. These quilts." "Well," I said, stumped, "what would you do with them?" "Hang them," she said, as if that was the only thing you could do with quilts. Maggie by now was standing in the door. I could almost hear the sound of her feet made as they scraped over each other. "She can have them, Mama," she said, like somebody used to never winning anything or having anything reserved for her. "I can't remember Grandma Dee without the quilt. I can remember Grandma Dee without the quilt." I looked at her hard. She had filled her bottom lip with chuckerberry snuff, and it gave her face a kind of dopey, hang-dog look. It was Grandma Dee and Big Dee who taught her how to quilt herself. She stood there with her scarred hands hidden in the folds of her skirt. She looked at her sister with something like fear, but she wasn't mad at her. This was Maggie's portion. This was the way she knew God to work. When I looked at her like that, something hit me in the top of my head and ran down the soles of my feet, just like when I'm in church and the Spirit of God touches me and I get happy and shout. I did something I never had done before, hugged Maggie to me, then dragged her into the room, snatched the quilts out of Miss Wangaro's hands, and dumped them into Maggie's lap. Maggie just sat there on my bed with her mouth open. "Take one or two of the others," I said to Dee. But she turned without a word and went out to Hakima Barba. "You just don't understand," she said, as Maggie and I came out the car. "What don't I understand?" I wanted to know. "Your heritage," she said, and then she turned to Maggie, kissed her, and said, "You ought to try to make something of yourself too, Maggie. It's really a new day for us. But from the way you and Mama still live, you'd never know it." Maggie smiled, maybe at the sunglasses, but a real smile, not scared. After we reached the car, the dust settled, I asked Maggie to bring me a dip of snuff, and then the two of us sat there just enjoying until it was time to go in to the house and go to bed.